What if I were to tell you that depression and anxiety were actually superpowers? All right, so that might be a little over the top, but let me explain. There have been men and women throughout all of history that have changed the world, and it may be because of or despite their depression and anxiety. So, what I mean is Vincent van Gogh, Edgar Allan Poe, these people have left artwork and literature that have just changed our perspectives of life. And it's possible that their depression, their mental health issues that they struggled with, changed how they saw the world and allowed us a different perspective, if you would. So, while it may not be quite a superpower, there are definitely some positives that can come from depression and anxiety. And I'd like to challenge you to think about that today. What are some good things? What are some positive things that come from either directly related to your depression and anxiety because of your depression and anxiety, or at the very least, despite your depression and anxiety? So let me start with depression. And again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a doctor of any kind. I'm just a man with depression and anxiety, and I want to share my story as an effort to draw awareness, get people more comfortable to speak about their depression and anxiety, so that we can help each other so much more. So again, let me start with my depression. So depression for me is very cyclic. I follow a very predictable pattern throughout the year of when I can expect to experience depression. And the end of the year, beginning of the new year is always a big one for me, always. Now, that's not to say it's isolated to that. There's other times throughout the year that are predictable, and there's also circumstantial stuff that can really drive me through a depression cycle. But the one at the end of the year is always predictable, always. And part of it's seasonal. I live in an area where you have snow and cold, long winters, but really it's an existential dread kind of thing. It's like experiencing a mini midlife crisis at the end of every year. I begin to question what I accomplished throughout the past year. I begin to question where I'm headed as I head into the next year. And while those things can be healthy, the unhealthy part is the overbearing, crushing weight of that feeling that it's not good enough. It's never good enough. No matter what you're doing, it's good enough. And I've experienced this not throughout my whole life, but certainly as a teenager forward. And it's interesting because I've done a lot of different things. I've been a youth director. I've worked in churches. I've done a lot of good things. And even during those times, I get to the end of the year and this crushing weight of worthlessness just weighs down upon me. Now, that's the negative side. Again, I told you I'd talk about the positives. The positive side is what that does is it drives me to create a list of things that I want to accomplish throughout the year. Goals, not New Year's resolutions, but specific and tangible goals that I want to achieve throughout the year. And I think to myself, I don't want to feel this way. And so maybe the best thing I can do is give myself every reason to not feel this way. Now, that's not particularly healthy. Again, I'm not a therapist. There's probably way better ways to handle it. But it's interesting that, again, as I lived with depression and anxiety without realizing it, because this was my normal, it's interesting to think about the adaptation that we do as we try to live with this, even if we don't know it's there. And so that's one of the things that my depression drives me to do. And honestly, personal and professional growth have really been a huge thing for me, I think directly because of my depression. Again, it drives me to want to achieve, and maybe from an unhealthy perspective. So as I journey now, my goal is, and my perspective is, I need to understand this depression. Setting out those achievement goals are not a bad thing. Those are healthy. But I need to start seeing this coming ahead of time and start preparing myself with those positive thoughts, because I can look back and say, nah, you know what? I'm not a horrible person. I'm not worthless. I look back and say, hey, these are the things that I've been able to accomplish. And that can be easier said than done. And so it's important to surround yourself with positive people that can encourage you and maybe share that. And, I've shared this thing with my wife, and so she knows it's coming. And, she tries to encourage me throughout that time of year as we try to think differently about it. And then there's the anxiety. Anxiety is a a difficult one because it's all about control. It's all about who's in control. Either you are or your anxiety is. And again, going back to my last video about depression and anxiety, how the science behind what happens during a panic attack, your heart's racing, you're in fight or flight mode, legit survival fight or flight mode without a target. And that can lead you to lose control. And as you lose control, you'll head into a panic attack. Or at the very least, just have this pressure and this anxiety just welling up inside you. So as I look back and I think to myself, now that I'm aware of the anxiety in my life, as I look back and try to think to myself, okay, what have I done to adapt to this? What have I done to live with this? What have I done to thrive despite or maybe directly because of the anxiety? And it's interesting because my professional growth is really tied to my anxiety, I believe. I work in a production facility that's high energy, fast paced, lots of things are going on. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of action. And waking up in the morning as I head into work, your anxiety starts pumping. This is the normal stuff that you deal with every day. It's a fine line between losing control and maintaining control. So what it does for me is it allows me to have a greater sense of focus and maybe even a greater ability to multitask as I begin to feel this. My heart's racing, my everything's going. I'm in fight or flight mode, but I have a target, and that target is whatever we're doing that day that needs to be achieved. And it gives me this, it gives me a greater sense of focus. The anxiety also has this overwhelming sense of a fear of failure for me. And again, this is not 100% healthy. This is what I've done despite this, and trying to find the positive in all of the negative. So, again, as I have this overwhelming sense of fear of failure, again, that drives me to succeed. And that's not all bad. It's maybe a little unhealthy to the perspective and extent that it is, but it's not all bad. The other thing my anxiety does for me is that worry that you experience of all the things that could go wrong. That's not always bad if you harness it and think to yourself, okay, here's a list of all the things that could go wrong. Here's a list of all the things that could fail. Here's a list of all the ways my day could just be a train wreck. Now here's what I'm going to do. And that's where it begins to change, and you begin to take control of that anxiety. You begin to take control of the situation. You say, I am going to head this off. I'm going to stave this off. I know that if this happens, the best course of action is this, and I'm going to prepare for that. And so that has also helped me in my professional and my personal life as you begin to look forward and you begin to look ahead and plan and prepare. But the trick is staying in control. And that comes back to breathing. That comes back to the right state of mind. And frankly, it comes back to this positive mindset that I'm talking about today. Depression and anxiety, it's so easy to look at and just think of all the negatives and all the horrific things that we try to struggle. Just existence, just functioning can be absolutely unbearable when you're struggling with depression and anxiety. But it behooves us to stop and think and say, what are the positive things that have happened? So when I made my first video, I had so many private messages. You guys reached out to me and were just, I feel the same way. I struggle with this in a huge, huge way. And thank you so much for speaking out. And again, that's the point, is that we can share with each other that we're not alone. So my challenge for you is, let's not keep it private messages this time. Let's not keep it personal. Let's open this up. And I would like you to either in the Facebook comments or the YouTube comments, and you can, make a burner YouTube account. Nobody needs to know who you are. It's just a username. But make in those comments, I want to know what are some positive things that you see in your life, either as a direct result of having depression and anxiety, or maybe just despite it, that despite the struggles, here are the things that you've been able to accomplish. I want to know, because I want us to band together and encourage each other through these dark times that we struggle with. Depression and anxiety is off the charts. There was no greater time. There was no more pertinent time to be doing this than now. And again, if this video was a help, like and subscribe. That's always subscribing on YouTube. That's always an encouragement to me as I know that it's reaching out and touching people, but the big thing is we got to stick together. Thanks a lot.